And now we're going to turn to Jules again for another one of his questions.
Yes, thank you, McLaren. How far down the rabbit hole have you gone? Have you investigated the elite's ritual sacrifices, mind control, and child molestation as exposed by Alex Jones, David Icke, and Kathy O'Brien, which you've talked about in your interviews and on your website? If indeed, as you mentioned in the movie, the elite have a depopulation plan to kill a large portion of us, then what Aikido move do you think is the most effective at this time? And considering the elite's history and their mindset, can we use their energy against them without causing them injury realistically? Or is it going to end not too well?
That's a powerful group of questions. First of all, I have gone down the rabbit hole as far as I could possibly go at this time. I've learned enough to know that there will always be more that I don't know, and that will probably shock me when I find out about it. But yes, I have looked into those areas extensively in terms of ritual sacrifices and child molestation in the secret societies and so forth. And I felt like I needed to kind of find the bottom, to have as full an understanding as I could, and to try to find compassion for the people who are doing this. And that was the bottom of the barrel for me. I mean, it's right there along with, mass genocide, which most of these invasions of countries with, 1 million people dying in Iraq and this type of thing. I mean, it's absolutely horrific, even though it's called, spreading democracy or something like that. The number of innocent deaths is just horrifying. But at the same time, to realize the people who could do that type of thing and then go out for dinner somewhere are very often the same people who are involved in this sort of distorted and destructive behavior on an individual basis behind closed doors. And I spent quite a while not only studying the phenomenon, reading people like Kathy O'Brien and Bryce Taylor and about their experiences, the Franklin cover-up and all of that, but it was helpful for me to actually look into the biographies of a lot of the high-level people who were involved in these things, and to realize that virtually every time, once I got enough information, these were people who were at least highly dominated and intimidated by authority figures in their childhood, if not right out abused, either physically, emotionally, sexually, or all of the above. And that these are people who are truly in deep pain and disassociated from the experience of love and honest feedback from other human beings. And that's what allows for that kind of bizarre behavior. And once I got to that realization, and David Icke was very helpful to me in this, because one of the reasons I interviewed him for the film was that when I read his book, The Biggest Secret, and came to I think it was the last chapter called I Love You, Dr. Kissinger, I just sat and read the title over for about 5 minutes going, what? And I was really impressed by the depth that he had found. And he said he didn't want to publish that book until he could honestly experience love for someone who's done what Henry Kissinger has done to other human beings' lives. And that was an inspiration for me to not hide from the gruesome information, but to find the compassion, find the place inside myself where, but for the grace of my particular path, I might have been that badly distorted any of us could have been. And once I got that, then I realized that my job is not to hate or to try to conquer or kill these people, but to actually operate in compassion with them, obsolete them from their roles of power, make sure that as much as possible they need to participate in a process of truth and true reconciliation about what's gone on, but at the same time to put the emphasis on the liberating of human systems rather than just judgment and vengeance. So it was very useful for me to find the kind of the bottom of the barrel like that, and that has fueled me to not feel like I'm going forward having to resist some aspect of the information.
Yeah, I'll speak for one moment into that also, because I think for me what was key in that understanding was that, we included the depopulation agenda because what we chose in the movie was to do the minimum sufficient understanding that we felt people had to have in order to come up with solutions that are commensurate to the task before us. And that if you don't understand that there is no protection, then you can't look accurately at what's happening. And it came up for us when there was a spray supposedly that was happening across Northern California. We bring it up in the movie, and that happened in our town here, where there was actually Homeland Security and the CDFA and all kinds of institutions involved in spraying an aerial spray over millions of people throughout Northern California to supposedly eradicate an apple moth that wasn't causing the problems that they were purporting. And anyway, if people didn't understand that spray that they were putting actually can kill us and has endocrine disruptors, and that you can't just look at it and go, well, they wouldn't do that, because how you'll mobilize and what you'll do in response to that as people protecting our families and our lives is very different once you're aware of how far they'll go. So we chose to kind of go to the minimum sufficient that people need to understand. And, that was controversial because that's a really hard one for people to grasp, that there are powers that be that actually, it's not just that they won't protect you, they'll actually kill you. That's a pretty far out notion there for a lot of people. And so we really tried to lay the groundwork to show that, the reason that we're bringing this up is because it's actually important for us if we're going to know what we need to do to mobilize in response to it. So we put our attention, we use the information to inform our solutions rather than to stay too long and hard in the gruesome details of what in fact goes on.
I mentioned before that I was involved in martial arts, and I trained and taught in the nonviolent martial art of Aikido for 15 years, and also did karate and Tai Chi. And I know from that experience that the primary imperative that I learned and would teach all of my students for protecting yourself and your loved ones is an immediate, accurate assessment of your reality. So if there's bad news in your reality, it's not going to help you survive to pretend it isn't there or to be ignorant of it. So one of the things that we're trying to do with Thrive is to do it in as gentle and user-friendly a way as possible, but not to shrink back. It was one of the most challenging things for us with our own team as to whether or not we were going to include the information about the depopulation agenda. And a number of the people in our network who advised against it, I had given them the Alex Jones's film, The Endgame, which was kind of the first film that I had seen that does a good job of laying out the facts and the history on the whole eugenics and depopulation movement. And so I passed those around, and each person who would suggest that we not put that in the film, when I would ask them if they had actually watched the movie all the way through, the only one who had was Kimberly. And she was the one who agreed with me that we needed to put it in there. And for me, what I would say to them was, if Paul Revere came riding through your town, and his horse kind of smelled, and his voice was kind of squeaky and stuff, it would be a shame to not pay attention to what he was saying because there were some uncomfortable aspects. The key thing is to know the information so that then you can respond effectively. So that's why we put that in there, because the evidence has only gotten stronger to me over the years, supporting the fact that there is an agenda by these people who not only want to control, but are willing to destroy, not even just willing, but relative to the topic we were just discussing, they actually get off on the process of inflicting suffering on other people. And that's a serious aspect of our reality to get an accurate assessment of.
Thank you.
And thank you, Jules. One of the enabling areas that will help us to break free of the elite's grip is the liberation of free energy technologies. Uranus Rising has a question on this topic.
Yes, whilst watching the part in the movie that showed an image of a small village in an undeveloped country that had a free energy device, I recalled my own experience of living in an undeveloped country. Yes, free energy would have done a lot of help to help those people. But other factors that were actually greater sources of suffering, ones that can't be addressed by free energy, included international political and economic injustices, land ownership injustices, lack of clean drinking water due to pollution of the aquifers, and more. Why do you see technology and free energy as a cure to such world problems? How do you see that technology addresses human problems such as greed, the quest for power, differing viewpoints that lead to conflict, or even generational traumas and suffering?
Well, there's something that we introduce in the movie in the solutions section, and when we're talking about the website, called the Sector Navigator, that we mentioned a little bit earlier in this conversation, where we have the 12 spheres around one, with worldview at the center and then all of the sectors around the outside. And one of the reasons why we keep emphasizing that model is that when we come to an issue like free energy technology, rather than considering it on its own, hopefully we can see it in the light of a whole system which includes the other sectors as well. Because one thing that we're absolutely not proposing is that technology is going to handle our evolution. It can be a very useful tool, but ultimately it itself is neutral. In terms of greed and conflict, if you have plenty of energy to go around, there's probably going to be less fighting over fossil fuels and that type of thing. So it can be a tremendous assistance in providing access to energy and having heat and being able to cook food and run the pump that'll bring up pressure water and that type of thing. But it's not an answer to everything unto itself. So in the looking from the point of view of the Sector Navigator, the free energy device might fall into the area of science. It certainly can affect areas of health and economics, but also it's important to recognize the other areas surrounding it, like ecology. That as we're addressing certain areas with an instrument, we also need to be addressing the other areas, especially with the most important instrument of all, which is human consciousness, both the mind and the heart, that needs to evolve in order to align itself consciously with the path of our own evolution, because technology clearly won't ever do it for us. In fact, the reason we're at the critical fork in the road we're at right now is that the technology that we have developed has a destructive capacity that is so far ahead of the general consciousness of civilization that we're at risk of destroying life as we know it on the planet. So I see them as needing to go forward hand in hand, and hopefully the Sector Navigator and the multiplicity of self-creating solutions that we and others are recommending can just encourage a conversation where people from these various sectors are all interacting in a synergetic way. And the last thing I'll say about that is one of the most encouraging things to me about the opportunity to be involved in a global conversation, as I've been able to be for the last month, is that virtually every interview that I've had a chance to participate in, like this one, some of them are groups that are particularly focused on conspiracy. Others are focused on economics. Others are focused on UFOs. Others are focused on consciousness or liberty. But I would say that there hasn't been a single interview that I've been involved in yet where there wasn't really quite a generalized awareness of the group, even if they had a particular topic interest to their community, that there is a really rapidly growing generalized awareness bridging these different areas and tying them together into synergetic thinking and synergetic activism. It's one of the most hopeful things that I've ever seen.